The Temporal Mist. Chapter 1. Echoes of the Past. The sleek hull of the Nova Celeste glinted in the morning sun, its quantum alloy frame a stark contrast to the century-old buildings lining New York Harbor. Captain Emily Briggs stood at the foot of the gangway, her eyes fixed on the ship that would carry her into history, or perhaps out of it. "She's a beauty, isn't she?" A voice startled Emily from her reverie. She turned to see Doctor Marcus Chen, the ship's chief scientist, his eyes alight with barely contained excitement. Emily nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "That she is, Dr. Chen, though I can't help but think of another ship that once stood in this very harbour." As if summoned by her words, the bustling dock seemed to shimmer and fade. For a moment, Emily could almost see the wooden piers of 1872, smell the tar and rope, hear the shouts of longshoremen loading cargo onto a brigantine with Mary Celeste proudly emblazoned on its stern. "Captain Briggs," Dr. Chen's voice snapped her back to 2072. "The crew is assembled for the christening ceremony." Emily straightened her uniform, pushing the vision aside. "Thank you, Doctor. Let's not keep them waiting." The crew of the Nova Celeste stood in a semicircle before the ship, a mix of anticipation and nervousness evident on their faces. Emily's gaze swept over them, noting the diverse array of specialists assembled for this unprecedented mission. As she stepped up to the podium, a hush fell over the gathered crowd. Emily cleared her throat, her voice strong and clear as she began. 200 years ago, another Captain Briggs stood where I stand today. He looked upon his ship, the Mary Celeste, with hope and determination. None could have foreseen the mystery that would unfold, a riddle that has captivated the world for 2 centuries. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today we embark on a journey not just across the Atlantic, but across time itself. The Nova Celeste carries not only the hopes of solving a historical enigma, but the promise of pushing the boundaries of what we thought possible. As Emily continued her speech, her words resonating with passion and purpose, she caught sight of Olivia DeVoe, the ship's first mate, standing at attention. Their eyes met briefly, a flicker of understanding passing between them. Both women carried the weight of their ancestors' legacy, a shared history that bound them to this mission in ways the others could never fully comprehend. The christening bottle shattered against the Nova Celeste's bow, champagne sparkling in the sunlight as cheers erupted from the crowd. Emily felt a surge of emotion, pride, anticipation, and a whisper of trepidation. As the crew began to board, Emily found herself hanging back, her hand resting on the cool metal of the gangway. Dr. Sarah Winchester, the ship's marine biologist, paused beside her. "Everything all right, Captain?" Sarah asked, her keen eyes searching Emily's face. Emily nodded, forcing a smile. "Just taking it all in, Dr. Winchester. It's not every day you set sail to chase ghosts." Sarah's laugh was warm and reassuring. "Ghosts, time rifts, or whatever we find out there. We've got the best team for the job, and the best captain to lead us." With a grateful nod, Emily took a deep breath and ascended the gangway. The deck of the Nova Celeste hummed with activity as final preparations were made. Holographic displays flickered to life, showing readouts of weather patterns, ocean currents, and the ship's systems. In the midst of the controlled chaos, Emily's eyes were drawn to the horizon. Somewhere out there, across time and space, the Mary Celeste was setting sail on its fateful journey. As the Nova Celeste's engines thrummed to life, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that their fates were intertwined in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Captain on deck!" Olivia's voice rang out, and the crew snapped to attention. Emily stepped forward, her voice steady as she gave the order. "Cast off all lines, take us out, Miss DeVoe." As the Nova Celeste glided away from the dock, the New York skyline receding behind them, Emily felt a shiver of anticipation run down her spine. The quest to unravel the mystery of the Mary Celeste had begun, and with it a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about time, fate, and the uncharted waters that lay ahead. The ship cut through the waves, leaving behind the familiar shores of home and sailing towards the unknown. As the last glimpse of land disappeared from view, Emily couldn't help but wonder, would they find the answers they sought? Or would the Nova Celeste become just another ghost story whispered by future generations? Chapter 2. The voyage begins. The Atlantic stretched before the Nova Celeste, an endless expanse of deep blue that seemed to mirror the vastness of time itself. Captain Emily Briggs stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the horizon as the ship carved its path through the waves. The futuristic vessel hummed with energy, a stark contrast to the wooden brigantine that had sailed these same waters 2 centuries ago. "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates for our first deep-sea scan," Olivia DeVoe announced, her fingers dancing over the holographic navigation console. Emily nodded, a mixture of excitement and apprehension churning in her gut. "Very good, Miss DeVoe. Alert Dr. Chen and have him prepare the temporal sensors." As Olivia relayed the order, Emily found her thoughts drifting to the Mary Celeste and its crew. What had they felt as they embarked on their ill-fated voyage? Had Captain Benjamin Briggs, her ancestor, sensed the weight of destiny upon his shoulders? The door to the bridge hissed open, and Dr. Marcus Chen strode in, his eyes alight with barely contained enthusiasm. "Captain, the temporal sensors are calibrated and ready. We're about to make history." Emily couldn't help but smile at the scientist's exuberance. "Let's hope so, Doctor. Though I'd settle for solving a historical mystery." As the crew prepared for their first major test of the ship's advanced technology, Emily called a meeting in the main conference room. The Nova Celeste's key personnel gathered around the large holographic display at the center of the room, faces etched with a mix of anticipation and skepticism. Dr. Chen took center stage, his hands gesticulating wildly as he explained his theories. "The temporal rifts we're searching for are not just holes in time," he began, his voice filled with passion. "They're more like intersections where different moments in history overlap." Jack Morehouse, the ship's text specialist, leaned back in his chair, a look of doubt on his face. "And we're supposed to just sail right into one of these intersections? Sounds like a good way to get ourselves lost in time." "That's why we have the temporal anchors," Dr. Chen replied, unfazed by the skepticism. "They'll keep us tethered to our own time, while allowing us to observe and potentially interact with the past." As the scientist continued his explanation, Emily watched the faces of her crew. Dr. Sarah Winchester listened intently, her brow furrowed in concentration. Olivia DeVoe seemed to be wrestling with the implications, her family's connection to the Mary Celeste adding personal stakes to the mission. "I know this all sounds far-fetched," Emily said, stepping forward as Dr. Chen concluded his presentation. "But we're here to push the boundaries of what's possible. Every great discovery in history seemed impossible until it was achieved." The meeting adjourned, and the crew dispersed to their stations. As Emily made her way back to the bridge, she felt a hand on her arm. It was Olivia, her eyes filled with a mix of emotion. "Captain, I need to talk to you," Olivia said, her voice low. "About our families, about this mission." Emily nodded, sensing the weight of unspoken words between them. They found a quiet corner of the ship's observation deck, the vast ocean stretching out before them. "I've been having dreams," Olivia began, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "About the Mary Celeste, about my ancestor." "It's like I can almost see what happened." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. "I've been experiencing something similar," she admitted. "Flashes of the past, moments that feel too real to be just imagination." As they shared their experiences, a bond began to form between the 2 women. Their shared heritage, creating a connection that transcended the normal boundaries between captain and first mate. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden lurch of the ship. Alarms blared as Emily and Olivia raced to the bridge. They found Doctor. Chen hunched over a console, his face pale. "Captain, we're detecting massive electromagnetic anomalies," he reported, his voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. "It's like nothing we've ever seen before." The ship's advanced systems began to flicker, holographic displays distorting and fading. Jack Morehouse's fingers flew over his console as he fought to maintain control of the ship's technology. "It's interfering with our navigation systems," Olivia called out, struggling to keep the ship on course. As the crew battled the unseen forces threatening to overwhelm them, Emily felt a strange sensation wash over her. The bridge seemed to shimmer, and for a moment she could have sworn she saw wooden beams and rigging superimposed over the sleek, futuristic interior of the Nova Celeste. "Everyone brace yourselves," Emily commanded, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're about to enter uncharted waters in more ways than one." The Nova Celeste pushed through the electromagnetic storm, its hull groaning under the strain. As suddenly as it had begun, the disturbance passed, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. "Status report," Emily demanded, her heart racing. One by one the crew reported in. Systems were coming back online, but the encounter had left its mark. Data streamed across the holographic displays, showing readings that defied explanation. Dr. Chen's eyes were wide as he analysed the information. "Captain," he said, his voice filled with awe, "I think we've just had our first brush with a temporal rift." As the implications of his words sank in, Emily realised that their mission had just become far more real and far more dangerous than any of them had anticipated. The mystery of the Mary Celeste was no longer just a historical puzzle. It was a gateway to understanding the very nature of time itself. With the Azores looming on the horizon, Emily knew that this was only the beginning. Whatever lay ahead, she and her crew were sailing into waters where the past and present collided, and where the fate of the Nova Celeste might well be intertwined with that of its centuries-old predecessor. As night fell and the stars emerged, Emily stood alone on the deck, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. The quest for answers had begun, but with each revelation, new questions arose. What other wonders or terrors awaited them in the temporal mists of the Atlantic? Chapter 3. Storms and Visions. The Nova Celeste pitched and rolled as angry waves crashed against its hull. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the tempest that had descended upon them with frightening suddenness. Captain Emily Briggs gripped the edge of the command console, her knuckles white as she fought to keep her footing. "All hands, brace for impact!" she shouted over the howling wind. The ship's AI-assisted navigation strained against the fury of the storm, holographic displays flickering with each thunderous boom. Olivia DeVoe's voice crackled over the comm system, tinged with urgency. "Captain, we're detecting severe electromagnetic disturbances. It's affecting our systems." As if in response to Olivia's warning, the lights on the bridge flickered and died, plunging the crew into momentary darkness before the emergency systems kicked in. The eerie red glow of the backup lights cast long shadows across the faces of the crew, etching their fear and determination in stark relief. Dr. Marcus Chen stumbled onto the bridge, his normally pristine lab coat dishevelled. "Captain, these readings, they're off the charts. The storm, it's not natural. I think we've encountered a temporal anomaly." Emily's mind raced. They were nearing the coordinates where the Mary Celeste had been found abandoned. Could this storm be connected to the mystery they sought to unravel? "Dr. Winchester," Emily called out, "what's the status of the ocean around us?"
Sarah Winchester's voice came through, strained but steady.
"The currents are behaving erratically, Captain. It's as if the water itself is confused." A massive wave struck the ship, sending several crew members sprawling. As Emily helped Dr. Chen to his feet, the world around her seemed to blur and shift. For a heart-stopping moment, she found herself no longer on the bridge of the Nova Celeste, but on the wooden deck of a 19th-century brigantine. The howling wind carried with it the shouts of sailors in period dress, frantically working to secure rigging and batten down hatches. Emily's heart pounded as she recognized the name emblazoned on a nearby lifeboat, Mary Celeste. "Sarah! Benjamin!" a man's voice called out, filled with panic. Emily turned to see a figure that could only be Captain Benjamin Briggs, her ancestor, ushering a woman and small child towards the ship's boat. As quickly as it had appeared, the vision vanished, leaving Emily gasping and disoriented on the bridge of the Nova Celeste. Captain Briggs, are you all right?" Olivia's concerned voice cut through the fog in Emily's mind. Emily blinked, forcing herself to focus on the here and now. "I'm fine," she managed, though her voice shook slightly. "Status report." As the crew worked to stabilize the ship and navigate through the storm, Emily couldn't shake the lingering effects of her vision. It had felt so real, so immediate. Was it merely a hallucination brought on by stress or something more? Hours passed as the Nova Celeste battled the elements. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the fury of the storm began to abate. Exhausted crew members slumped at their stations, the adrenaline of survival giving way to bone-deep weariness. In the aftermath of the tempest, Emily called an emergency meeting of the senior staff. As they gathered in the conference room, she could see the same haunted look in their eyes that she felt in her own soul. "I know we've all been through hell," Emily began, her voice hoarse from shouting orders. "But I need to know if anyone else experienced anything unusual during the storm." A heavy silence fell over the room. Then, hesitantly, Olivia spoke up. I saw something, or someone. A man in old-fashioned clothes, calling out for his family. One by one, other crew members shared similar accounts. Visions of the past, glimpses of the Mary Celeste and its crew, all vivid and terrifyingly real. Dr. Chen leaned forward, his eyes alight with a mixture of fear and fascination. "It appears we've all experienced some form of shared hallucination or temporal displacement. The question is, why?" As the discussion continued, theories were proposed and debated. Was it a result of the electromagnetic disturbances, a side effect of their temporal scanning technology, or something more profound, a genuine glimpse across the barriers of time? Dr. Sarah Winchester cleared her throat, drawing the room's attention. "There's something else," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "During the storm, I detected anomalies in the ocean's electromagnetic field. It's as if the water itself is charged with some kind of temporal energy." The implications of Sarah's discovery sent a ripple of unease through the gathered crew. They had sailed into these waters, seeking answers about the Mary Celeste. But now it seemed the mystery ran far deeper than any of them had imagined. As the meeting drew to a close, Emily felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. The crew looked to her for guidance, for reassurance in the face of the unknown. But how could she provide certainty when their very perception of reality had been called into question? "We came here to solve a mystery," Emily said, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. "And that's exactly what we're going to do. Whatever we experienced during that storm, whatever lies ahead, we face it together. We are the crew of the Nova Celeste, and we will not be deterred by storms, visions, or the very fabric of time itself." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, the shared determination of the crew pushing back against the fear of the unknown. As the meeting adjourned and the crew dispersed to their duties, Emily found herself drawn to the observation deck. The sea, so recently turbulent, now stretched calm and innocuous to the horizon. But she knew that beneath that placid surface, forces beyond their understanding were at work. Olivia joined her at the railing, her presence a silent comfort. "What do you think it means, Captain?" she asked softly. "These visions, the storm, it's as if the past is reaching out to us." Emily's gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "I don't know, Olivia, but I intend to find out. Whatever happened to the Mary Celeste, whatever is happening to us now, it's all connected. And we're going to unravel that connection, no matter the cost." As the two women stood in contemplative silence, the Nova Celeste continued its journey into waters that held secrets spanning centuries. The calm after the storm was deceptive, a brief respite before plunging deeper into the temporal mists that shrouded the truth. Little did they know that their next encounter with the unknown would make the storm seem like a mere prelude to the wonders and terrors that awaited them. Chapter 4. The Mist Appears. The Nova Celeste cut through calm waters, the previous day's tempest nothing more than a memory etched in the weary faces of the crew. Captain Emily Briggs stood on the bridge, her eyes fixed on the holographic display that showed their approach to the fateful coordinates where the Mary Celeste had been found abandoned 2 centuries ago. "We're nearing the target location, Captain," Olivia DeVoe announced, her voice tight with anticipation. Emily nodded, feeling the weight of history pressing down upon her. "All hands to stations. Dr. Chen, are the temporal sensors ready?" "Affirmative, Captain," the scientist replied, his fingers dancing over his console. "We're primed to detect any anomalies." As the ship drew closer to its destination, an eerie calm settled over the bridge. The constant hum of the advanced engines seemed muted, as if the very air was holding its breath in anticipation. Suddenly, alarms blared to life, startling the crew from their tense vigil.
Captain Jack Morehouse called out, his voice strained.
"We're experiencing massive interference across all systems."
Before Emily could respond, a dense, shimmering mist began to materialize around the ship.
It was unlike any fog she had ever seen, with tendrils that seemed to move with purpose, coiling and uncoiling as if alive. "Full stop," Emily commanded. "All hands prepare for—" Her words were cut short as the mist enveloped the Nova Celeste completely. The bridge plunged into darkness, only to be illuminated moments later by an otherworldly, pulsing glow emanating from the mist itself. As systems flickered and failed around them, Emily felt a familiar disorientation wash over her. The sleek, futuristic bridge of the Nova Celeste seemed to waver and distort, overlaying with images of wooden beams and old-fashioned navigational equipment. "Is everyone seeing this?" Dr. Sarah Winchester's voice trembled as she spoke, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and wonder. Through the windows of the bridge, now resembling the portholes of a 19th-century ship, Emily caught glimpses of another vessel. Her heart raced as she recognized the distinctive silhouette of the Mary Celeste, appearing and disappearing in the swirling mist. "Dr. Chen!" Emily called out, fighting to keep her voice steady. "What's happening?" The scientist was hunched over his console, which now flickered between displays of advanced temporal readings and what appeared to be an old-fashioned ship's log. It's incredible, Captain," he breathed. "We're not just detecting a temporal anomaly, we're inside one." As the crew struggled to make sense of their surroundings, Jack Morehouse let out a string of colourful curses. "Captain, communications are down. I can't reach anyone outside the ship." Emily's mind raced, trying to process the situation and formulate a plan. They were trapped in some kind of temporal bubble, cut off from the outside world, with systems failing all around them. And somewhere in this mystical fog the Mary Celeste waited, its secrets tantalizing close. "All right, listen up," Emily said, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. "We trained for the unexpected. This may be beyond anything we imagined, but we're still the crew of the Nova Celeste. Dr. Chen, I need you working on understanding this anomaly. Mr. Morehouse, do whatever you can to get our systems back online. Dr. Winchester, monitor the environmental conditions inside and outside the ship. Ms. DeVoe, you're with me." As the crew sprang into action, Emily and Olivia made their way to the observation deck. The mist swirled around them, occasionally parting to reveal tantalizing glimpses of the Mary Celeste. "It's really her," Olivia whispered, her voice filled with awe. "After all this time, all the stories." "She's right there." Emily nodded, her throat tight with emotion. "The question is, what do we do now? We can see her, but can we interact? And more importantly, should we?" As if in answer to her questions, a figure appeared on the deck of the Mary Celeste. Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized Captain Benjamin Briggs, her ancestor, looking directly at them with an expression of bewilderment and fear. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the two captains locked eyes across time and space. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the vision of the Mary Celeste faded, swallowed once more by the temporal mist. Emily turned to Olivia, her mind reeling from what they had just witnessed. "We need to find a way to stabilize this anomaly," she said. If we can maintain a connection, we might finally uncover the truth about what happened to the Mary Celeste. As they hurried back to the bridge, the Nova Celeste groaned and shuddered, as if straining against the very fabric of time. Sparks flew from consoles, and the air was filled with the acrid smell of overloading circuits. "Captain!" Dr. Chen called out as Emily and Olivia entered. "I've managed to get some readings on the anomaly. It's like nothing we've ever encountered. The temporal distortions are creating a bridge between our time and 1872, but it's highly unstable." Emily's mind raced with the implications. They were on the verge of solving one of the greatest maritime mysteries in history, but at what cost? The safety of her crew, the integrity of the timeline itself, all were at risk. As she opened her mouth to give orders, a violent tremor shook the ship. Warnings blared from every console, and the mist outside the windows began to pulse with an ominous, otherworldly light. "Captain!" Jack Morehouse's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Whatever's happening, it's tearing the ship apart. We need to get out of here, now." Emily Briggs stood at the center of the maelstrom, the weight of command heavy on her shoulders. In that moment, she knew that the decisions she made next would not only determine the fate of the Nova Celeste and its crew, but could potentially alter the course of history itself. The temporal mist swirled and pulsed around them, a silent witness to the drama unfolding on the bridge of the Nova Celeste. As alarms blared and systems failed, Emily Briggs faced the greatest challenge of her career and perhaps the most crucial moment in the long, intertwined histories of two ships separated by 2 centuries of mystery. Chapter 5. Crossing Timelines. The Nova Celeste hung suspended in the shimmering temporal mist, a vessel out of time and place. On the bridge, Captain Emily Briggs fought to maintain order as reality itself seemed to warp around them. Dr. Chen Emily called out over the cacophony of alarms and failing systems. "Talk to me. What are we dealing with here?" The scientist's fingers flew over his console, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of the mist outside. "Captain, it's extraordinary," he said, his voice a mixture of fear and excitement. "We've encountered a stable temporal rift. It's like a tunnel connecting our time with 1872. As if to underscore his words, the mist parted momentarily, revealing the ghostly image of the Mary Celeste. The 19th century brigantine seemed to flicker in and out of existence, its outline wavering like a mirage. "Can we communicate with them?" Emily asked, her heart racing at the sight of the ship that had haunted her family's history for generations. Dr. Chen shook his head. "Not directly, no. But I'm detecting intense temporal energy signatures. If we can find a way to modulate our own systems to match that frequency, we might be able to. Well, to observe events as they unfold." Emily's mind reeled with the implications. They were on the verge of witnessing history firsthand, of potentially solving the greatest maritime mystery of all time. But at what cost? "Captain," Olivia DeVoe's voice cut through Emily's thoughts, "we're picking up multiple temporal echoes. It's not just one moment we're seeing. It's like the Mary Celeste is caught in some kind of loop." Before Emily could respond, the ship lurched violently. Sparks erupted from several consoles, and the lights flickered ominously. Hull integrity compromised. Jack Morehouse shouted from his station. "Whatever this temporal rift is doing, it's tearing us apart." Emily gripped the edge of her command chair, her knuckles white. "Dr. Chen, can we stabilize our position in the rift?" The scientist's hands flew over his controls. "I'm trying, Captain, but our systems weren't designed for this kind of temporal stress. If I pushed too hard, we could end up trapped here. Or worse." As the crew fought to keep the Nova Celeste intact, Emily found her gaze drawn to the flickering image of the Mary Celeste. She could see figures moving on the deck, her ancestors, going about their daily routines, unaware of the mystery they would become. A plan began to form in Emily's mind. It was risky, possibly insane, but might be their only chance to uncover the truth and save themselves in the process. "Dr. Chen," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos around them, "you said we can't communicate directly. But can we send a signal through the rift? Something that might be picked up in 1872. The scientist's eyes widened as he grasped her intent. Theoretically, yes. But, Captain, the risks of altering the timeline are less than the risk of us being torn apart by this rift, Emily finished for him. Do it. Send a simple signal. Something that might be mistaken for a natural phenomenon in their time. As Dr. Chen worked to implement her order, Emily turned to the rest of her crew. Listen up. We're going to attempt to make contact with the Mary Celeste. I know the risks, but this may be our only chance to understand what happened, and to ensure our own survival. The bridge fell silent for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. Then, one by one, the crew nodded their agreement. They had come too far to turn back now. Suddenly the temporal mist seemed to coalesce, forming a window-like opening that looked out onto the deck of the Mary Celeste. The scene was so clear, so immediate, that Emily felt as if she could reach out and touch the wooden railings. She saw Captain Benjamin Briggs, her ancestor, standing at the helm. His face was etched with concern as he studied the sky, which roiled with unnatural colours, the result, Emily realised, of their attempt at communication. "It's working," Dr. Chen whispered in awe. "We're actually seeing events unfold in real time. 200 years in the past." As they watched, transfixed, the crew of the Mary Celeste began to react to the strange phenomena around them. Emily could see the fear and confusion on their faces, the growing realization that something was terribly wrong. "Captain Briggs," Olivia said softly, her eyes never leaving the scene before them. He's ordering the crew to abandon ship. But why? The Mary Celeste looks perfectly seaworthy." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. Were they witnessing the very moment that had puzzled historians for centuries? The moment when the crew of the Mary Celeste chose to leave their ship, never to be seen again. As they watched, helpless to intervene, the crew of the Mary Celeste began to lower the ship's boat. Captain Benjamin Briggs ushered his wife and young daughter towards it, his face a mask of determined fear. "We have to do something," Olivia cried out, her professional detachment crumbling in the face of the unfolding tragedy. But before anyone could respond, the temporal window began to distort and fade. The image of the Mary Celeste wavered, replaced by flashes of other moments. The ship drifting empty, the discovery by the Dei Gratia, the ensuing investigation. "The rift is destabilizing, Doctor." Chen shouted over the renewed blaring of alarms. "Captain, we need to pull back now, or we'll be trapped." Emily stood frozen for a moment, torn between the historian's desire to witness more and the captain's duty to her crew. With a heavy heart, she made her decision. "Full reverse," she commanded. "Get us out of here now." The Nova Celeste shuddered as its engines strained against the pull of the temporal rift. For a heart-stopping moment, it seemed as if they might be trapped forever between times. Then, with a final, violent lurch, they broke free. As the shimmering mists dissipated around them, revealing the calm waters of the Atlantic, an eerie silence fell over the bridge. The crew of the Nova Celeste looked at each other in stunned disbelief, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Emily Briggs sank into her command chair, her mind reeling. They had come seeking answers about the Mary Celeste, and in a way, they had found them. But those answers had only led to more questions. Questions that challenged their understanding of time, fate, and the very nature of history itself. As the Nova Celeste limped away from the site of their extraordinary encounter, Emily knew that their journey was far from over. They had crossed timelines and glimpsed the past, but the full truth of the Mary Celeste's fate and its connection to their own remained tantalizingly out of reach. The temporal mist may have receded, but its effects lingered, leaving the crew of the Nova Celeste forever changed by their brush with history. As they sailed on, the weight of what they had witnessed and what they had yet to discover hung heavy over the ship, a constant reminder of the thin line between past and present, mystery and revelation. Chapter 6. The Abandoned Ship. The Nova Celeste drifted silently in the vast expanse of the Atlantic, its once gleaming hull now bearing the scars of its encounter with the temporal rift. On the bridge, Captain Emily Briggs surveyed her crew, noting the mixture of exhaustion and bewilderment etched on their faces. "Status report," she commanded, her voice hoarse from hours of shouting orders. One by one, the department heads delivered their assessments. The ship had suffered significant damage, with multiple systems offline or functioning at reduced capacity. But they were alive, and more importantly, they had witnessed something extraordinary. "Dr. Chen," Emily turned to the scientist who was still poring over data from their encounter. "What exactly did we see in that rift?" Chen looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. "Captain, we've recorded temporal echoes spanning decades. It's as if the Mary Celeste is trapped in a time loop, reliving key moments of its history over and over." A heavy silence fell over the bridge as the implications sank in. They had not just glimpsed a single moment in time, but a tapestry of events woven through history. "And what about our interference?" Emily asked, remembering the signal they had sent through the rift. "Did we change anything?" Chen shook his head slowly. "It's impossible to say for certain, but based on our readings I believe we may have always been part of the Mary Celeste's story. Our signal, our very presence, could be what triggered the crew to abandon ship in the first place." The weight of this revelation was palpable. Had they, in their quest to solve the mystery, inadvertently caused it? Before Emily could respond, alarms blared to life once more. "Captain!" Olivia called out from her station. "We're detecting another temporal disturbance. It's right on top of us." The air on the bridge seemed to shimmer and distort. For a moment Emily thought the rift was reopening, but as her vision cleared, she gasped in shock. There, floating alongside the Nova Celeste, was the Mary Celeste itself. "My God!" Dr. Sarah Winchester breathed. "It's really her." The 19th-century brigantine appeared solid and real, no longer a ghostly apparition glimpsed through temporal mist. Its sails hung limp in the windless air, and its deck was eerily empty. Emily's mind raced. This was an opportunity they couldn't afford to miss. "Prepare a boarding party," she ordered, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We're going aboard." Protests immediately erupted from several crew members. "Captain, the risks," Dr. Chen began, but Emily cut him off with a raised hand. "I'm well aware of the risks, Doctor, but we may never have another chance like this. We came here for answers, and they're right there, waiting for us." Emily turned to her first mate. "Olivia, you're with me. Dr. Winchester, we'll need your expertise as well. Mr. Morehouse, keep working on our systems. If anything changes, I want to know immediately." As the boarding party prepared, Emily felt a mix of trepidation and exhilaration. She was about to step foot on the ship that had haunted her family's legacy for generations. The short journey across to the Mary Celeste was surreal. Emily's boots hit the weathered deck with a solid thud, dispelling any notion that this might be an illusion. The wood creaked beneath their feet as the small team spread out, taking in their surroundings with a mixture of awe and unease. "It's like stepping into a museum," Dr. Winchester murmured, running her hand along the ship's railing. Emily nodded, her eyes scanning the deck. Everything was in its place: coiled ropes, secured barrels, tools left mid-task. There was no sign of struggle, no indication of the crew's hasty departure. "Let's split up," Emily ordered. "Olivia, check the crew quarters. Dr. Winchester, examine the cargo hold. I'll investigate the captain's cabin." As her team members moved off to their assigned areas, Emily made her way to the stern of the ship. She hesitated for a moment outside the captain's cabin, her hand hovering over the door handle. With a deep breath, she pushed it open. The cabin was small but well appointed, with a writing desk, a narrow bunk, and shelves lined with books and navigational instruments. Emily's eyes were immediately drawn to the desk, where an open logbook lay, its pages filled with neat, flowing script. With trembling fingers she touched the paper, marvelling at its realness. The last entry was dated November 25th, 1872, 10 days before the Mary Celeste was found abandoned. As Emily leaned in to read the entry, a floorboard creaked behind her. She whirled around, her heart pounding, to find herself face to face with a man in 19th century captain's attire. "Who are you?" the man demanded, his voice a mix of confusion and anger. "What are you doing on my ship?" Emily's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the face from old family photographs. "Captain Benjamin Briggs," she whispered. The man's eyes widened in shock. "How do you know my name? What manner of witchcraft is this?" Before Emily could respond, she heard Olivia's voice calling frantically from the deck. "Captain Briggs, you need to see this." Emily turned back to her ancestor, but he had vanished as suddenly as he had appeared. Shaken, she hurried back to the main deck. What she saw there made her blood run cold. The calm sea they had traversed to board the Mary Celeste was gone, replaced by roiling, angry waves. The sky had darkened ominously, and in the distance a wall of temporal mist was advancing rapidly towards them. "We need to get back to the Nova Celeste now," Emily shouted over the rising wind. As they scrambled to return to their ship, Emily's mind raced. They had found the Mary Celeste, had even glimpsed its captain, but instead of answers, they were left with even more questions. The boarding party barely made it back to the Nova Celeste before the temporal mist engulfed both ships. As alarms blared and the crew fought to stabilize their vessel, Emily watched in horror as the Mary Celeste began to fade from view. "No," she cried out, reaching futilely towards the disappearing ship. "We were so close." As the mist cleared, the Mary Celeste was gone, leaving the Nova Celeste alone once more on the vast Atlantic. The crew stood in stunned silence, trying to process what they had just experienced. Emily turned to Dr. Chen, her voice tight with urgency. "Tell me you got readings from that encounter." The scientist nodded, his fingers already flying over his console. "Massive amounts of data, Captain. It'll take time to analyze, but this could be the breakthrough we've been waiting for." As the crew set about assessing the damage and analyzing their findings, Emily retreated to her quarters. She sat at her desk, her mind reeling from the day's events. They had boarded the Mary Celeste, had seen with their own eyes the ship that had become legend. And yet the mystery seemed deeper than ever. Emily pulled out a small leather-bound journal, a family heirloom passed down through generations of Briggs. As she opened it, a slip of paper fell out, yellowed with age. Her heart nearly stopped as she recognized the handwriting from the logbook she had seen on the Mary Celeste. With shaking hands, she unfolded the paper and began to read. The message it contained would change everything they thought they knew about the Mary Celeste's fate and the true nature of their mission. As the Nova Celeste sailed on through waters that held more secrets than they had ever imagined, Emily Briggs realized that they had crossed a point of no return. The past and present were intertwined in ways they were only beginning to understand, and the answers they sought might come at a cost higher than any of them were prepared to pay. Chapter 7. Unraveling the Mystery. The conference room of the Nova Celeste hummed with tension as Captain Emily Briggs laid out the weathered piece of paper on the table. The senior crew leaned in, their faces a mix of anticipation and trepidation. "This," Emily began, her voice steady despite the turmoil in her mind, "was found in a family heirloom. It's a message from Captain Benjamin Briggs, written on the day the Mary Celeste was abandoned." Dr. Chen's eyes widened. "But how is that possible? The last log entry was days before." Emily held up a hand to silence him. "Listen to what it says. To whomever may find this, I write in haste and great confusion. Strange lights in the sky, unnatural mists that seem alive. My crew speaks of visions, of a great ship unlike any seen before. I fear for our safety, for our very sanity. We abandon ship not due to any earthly peril, but in the face of something beyond our understanding. May God have mercy on our souls, and may those who come after us heed this warning. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved." She looked up at her stunned crew. "It's signed and dated December 4th, 1872, the very day the Mary Celeste was abandoned." A heavy silence fell over the room as the implications sank in. It was Olivia who finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. They saw us. Our presence in the temporal rift. We're the reason they abandoned ship." Dr. Chen shook his head, his scientific mind rebelling against the paradox. "But that's impossible. If we caused the abandonment, and the abandonment is what led to our mission, where did it all begin?" "A time loop," Dr. Winchester breathed, her eyes alight with realization. "We're not just observing history, we're part of it. Always have been." Emily nodded grimly. "Which means our next steps are crucial. We've already affected the timeline. The question now is, how do we proceed without making things worse?" The debate that followed was heated. Some argued for immediately aborting the mission and returning home. Others, like Dr. Chen, pushed for further exploration of the temporal rift.
"We have a unique opportunity here," the scientist insisted.
"We could learn so much about the nature of time itself." "At what cost?" Jack Morehouse countered. "We've already messed with history. Who knows what damage we could do if we keep pushing?" As the arguments flew back and forth, Emily found her gaze drawn to the ancient message from her ancestor. The fear and confusion in those hastily scribbled words resonated deeply with her own tumultuous emotions. "Enough," she said finally, her quiet voice cutting through the debate. "We didn't come this far to turn back now, but we also can't recklessly charge ahead. We need a plan, one that allows us to complete our mission while minimizing our impact on the timeline." She turned to Dr. Chen. "You said you have a way to stabilize the temporal rift, to allow us more controlled observations." The scientist nodded eagerly. "Yes, but it's risky. We'd be exposing ourselves to intense temporal energies. The physical and psychological effects could be unpredictable." Emily's jaw set in determination. "Then we prepare as best we can. Dr. Winchester, I want full medical evaluations of anyone who'll be directly involved. Mr. Morehouse, work with Dr. Chen to boost our shielding. We go in as protected as possible." As the crew dispersed to carry out her orders, Emily felt a hand on her arm. It was Olivia, her eyes filled with concern. "Are you sure about this, Captain? We could be walking into something we can't handle." Emily smiled wryly. "When has that ever stopped us before? Besides, we owe it to them." She nodded towards the message on the table. "To all of them, past and present, to see this through." Over the next few hours, the Nova Celeste buzzed with activity. Equipment was modified, plans were drawn up and discarded, contingencies upon contingencies were debated. Through it all, Emily felt the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. Every decision, every calculated risk could have consequences spanning centuries. As the preparations neared completion, she called the senior staff together one last time. "I won't lie to you," she began, looking each of them in the eye. "What we're about to attempt is dangerous and unprecedented. We're not just exploring uncharted waters, we're venturing into the unknown fabric of time itself. If anyone wishes to stay behind, to return to the safety of our own time, I'll understand." The silence that followed was profound. Then, one by one, her crew reaffirmed their commitment to the mission. "We're with you, Captain," Olivia said, speaking for all of them. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Emily nodded, feeling a surge of pride in her crew. "Then let's make history, or perhaps preserve it." Dr. Chen initiated the stabilization sequence. As the scientist began the delicate process of manipulating the temporal energies surrounding the ship, Emily moved to the observation window. The sea outside seemed to shimmer and warp, reality itself bending under the strain of their endeavor. In that moment, standing on the precipice of the unknown, Emily Briggs thought of all those who had come before, the crew of the Mary Celeste, the generations of her family who had lived under the shadow of this mystery, and the countless others who had looked to the sea and wondered at its secrets. "Hold on, everyone," she murmured, more to herself than to her crew. "We're about to find out what really happened to the Mary Celeste, and perhaps to ourselves." As the Nova Celeste plunged once more into the swirling mists of time, the line between past and present, between observer and participant, blurred into insignificance. Whatever revelations awaited them on the other side of this temporal voyage, Emily knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The mystery of the Mary Celeste, which had endured for 2 centuries, was about to be unravelled. But as with all great discoveries, the answers they sought might come at a price none of them could have anticipated. Chapter 8. The Time Loop. The Nova Celeste shuddered as it penetrated the shimmering veil of the temporal rift. On the bridge, Captain Emily Briggs gripped her command chair, her knuckles white, as reality itself seemed to warp around them. "Status report," she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. Dr. Chen's fingers flew over his console, his face illuminated by the eerie glow of temporal energy. "Stabilization field holding, Captain. We're maintaining our position in the rift, but the strain on our systems is enormous." Through the viewscreen, Emily watched in awe as scenes from different time periods flickered in and out of existence. One moment they were surrounded by the calm 19th century seas, the next they were witnessing the Mary Celeste's discovery by the Dei Gratia. "It's incredible," Dr. Winchester breathed, her scientific curiosity overriding her fear. "We're seeing the entire history of the Mary Celeste played out before us." But as the temporal visions continued to shift and change, a pattern began to emerge. Emily leaned forward, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Dr. Chen," she said slowly, "are we seeing the same events repeating?" The scientist nodded, his expression grave. "I believe so, Captain. It appears the Mary Celeste is indeed trapped in a time loop, reliving key moments of its history over and over." The implications of this revelation sent a chill down Emily's spine. "Can we determine the cause? Is it natural or—" Her words trailed off as a new scene materialized before them. It showed the deck of the Mary Celeste, but something was different. Among the 19th century crew, Emily spotted figures in familiar uniforms, Nova Celeste crew members. "That's us," Olivia gasped. "But we haven't. We're not there now. Are we seeing the future?" Dr. Chen shook his head, his voice filled with awe and trepidation. "Not the future, Ms. DeVoe. I believe we're seeing another iteration of the loop. We've been here before, or we will be. The distinction is becoming meaningless." As they watched, they saw their future selves interact with the Mary Celeste crew, saw the moment of panic that led to the ship's abandonment, and then, shockingly, they witnessed the Nova Celeste itself being pulled into the rift, becoming part of the endless cycle. "My God," Emily whispered, "we're not just observing the loop. We're part of it." The weight of this realization settled over the bridge like a heavy blanket. They had come seeking answers, only to find themselves ensnared in the very mystery they sought to solve. "Can we break it?" Jack Morehouse asked, his usual bravado replaced by genuine fear. "There has to be a way out, right?" Dr. Chen's face was grim as he studied the readings on his console. "Theoretically, yes. But any attempt to alter the loop could have catastrophic consequences. We could erase ourselves from history, or worse." Emily stood, her decision made. "We didn't come this far to accept defeat. If we're part of this loop, then we have the power to change it." "Dr. Chen, what do we need to do?" The scientist hesitated, then began outlining a daring plan. They would need to synchronize their actions perfectly with a specific point in the loop, using the Nova Celeste's advanced technology to create a temporal resonance that could potentially shatter the cycle. As the crew rushed to make preparations, Emily found herself drawn once more to the observation window. The scenes of past, present and future continued to play out before her, a dizzying kaleidoscope of time. She thought of Captain Benjamin Briggs and his crew, of the generations of her family who had lived under the shadow of this mystery. Had they all been pawns in this cosmic game of temporal chess? Or was there a greater purpose to their intertwined fates? "Captain," Olivia's voice interrupted her musings. "We're ready." Emily turned to face her crew, seeing in their eyes the same mix of determination and fear that she felt in her own heart. "Remember," she said, her voice carrying across the bridge, "whatever happens, we face it together." For the crews of both the Mary Celeste and the Nova Celeste, past and future, we will break this cycle. As Dr. Chen began the countdown to their attempt, Emily sent up a silent prayer to whatever forces might be listening. They were about to challenge the very laws of time itself, and the consequences of failure were unimaginable. Initiating temporal resonance in 3, 2, 1. The Nova Celeste lurched violently as waves of energy pulsed from its hull. The view screen exploded in a kaleidoscope of fractured timelines, scenes from past and future, colliding in a chaotic maelstrom. Alarms blared as the ship's systems strained against the temporal backlash. "Hull integrity failing!" Jack shouted over the din. "We can't take much more of this." Emily gripped her command chair, her voice rising above the chaos. "Hold on. We just need a few more seconds." As if in response to her words, a blinding light filled the bridge. Emily felt a sensation of falling, of being stretched and compressed simultaneously. For a timeless moment, she experienced every iteration of the loop at once. The fear of the Mary Celeste's crew, the determination of her own, the endless cycle of mystery and discovery. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing apart, everything went black.
When Emily opened her eyes, she found herself lying on the deck of a ship.
For a moment she feared they had failed, that they were still trapped in the loop. But as her vision cleared, she realized something was different. The Nova Celeste bobbed gently on calm seas, the temporal mist completely dissipated. Around her, her crew was slowly regaining consciousness, looking as disoriented as she felt. "Status report," Emily croaked, her throat dry and her head pounding. Dr. Chen stumbled to his feet, making his way to the nearest console. His eyes widened as he read the display. "Captain, it's over. We've done it. The temporal loop is broken."
A cheer went up from the crew, but Emily held up a hand for silence.
"What about the Mary Celeste? And the timeline? Have we changed anything?" Dr. Winchester was already poring over historical data on her tablet. "It's remarkable, Captain. According to our records, the Mary Celeste mystery remains intact. The ship was still found abandoned, just as before." But she paused, her brow furrowing. "But what?" Emily pressed. "There are subtle differences. Reports of strange lights, unexplained mists. And the logbook." Dr. Winchester looked up, her eyes meeting Emily's. "The final entry mentions a ship from beyond time that appeared to them just before they abandoned their vessel." Emily felt a chill run down her spine. They had changed history, but in a way that preserved the core of the mystery. The loop was broken, but its echoes remained. As the crew worked to assess the full extent of their situation, Emily retreated to her quarters. She needed a moment to process everything that had happened. On her desk, she found the leather-bound journal that had started this whole adventure. With trembling hands, she opened it. There, on a page that she could have sworn was blank before, was a new entry. The handwriting was achingly familiar, her own. "To all who come after," it read, "know that the mystery of the Mary Celeste is more than a simple tale of an abandoned ship. It is a story of time itself, of choices and consequences that echo across centuries. We have seen wonders and terrors beyond imagination, and we have learned that some questions may never have simple answers. But in breaking the loop, we have ensured that the story can continue, that new chapters can be written. To those who seek the truth, I say this, look not just to the past, but to the future. For in the end, it is our actions, our choices that shape the course of history." Emily sat back, a mix of emotions washing over her. They had solved the mystery in a sense, but had also deepened it. The true legacy of the Mary Celeste, she realized, was not in its disappearance, but in the questions it continued to inspire. As the Nova Celeste began its long journey home, Emily knew that their adventure was far from over. They carried with them knowledge that would change the world's understanding of time, space, and the interconnectedness of all things. But more than that, they carried the weight of two ships' histories, the Mary Celeste and the Nova Celeste, now forever intertwined. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever new mysteries awaited them, Emily Briggs and her crew would face them with the courage and determination born from their extraordinary voyage through the temporal mists. The sea stretched out before them as vast and full of possibilities as ever, and somewhere, in the depths of time and space, the echoes of their adventure continued to ripple outward, touching lives and shaping destinies in ways they might never fully understand. As Emily gazed out at the horizon, she whispered a silent thank you to Captain Benjamin Briggs and all those who had come before. Their story was now complete, yet in many ways it was just beginning. Chapter 9, Race Against Time. The Nova Celeste cut through the waves with renewed purpose, its hull still bearing the scars of its journey through time. On the bridge, Captain Emily Briggs stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The mystery of the Mary Celeste had been solved, but at a cost none of them had anticipated. "Captain," Olivia's voice broke through Emily's reverie, "we're picking up some strange readings. It looks like temporal aftershocks." Emily's brow furrowed as she studied the data scrolling across the main view screen. The fabric of time around them was still unstable, ripples of chronal energy spreading outward from their location. Dr. Chen burst onto the bridge, his normally neat appearance dishevelled. "Captain, we have a problem, a big one." "What is it, Doctor?" Emily asked, though the pit in her stomach told her she already knew. "The temporal rift," Chen said, his voice tight with urgency. "When we broke the loop, we didn't just free ourselves. We unleashed a wave of temporal energy that's spreading across the ocean if we don't contain it. It could alter the entire timeline," Emily finished, the full weight of their situation crashing down upon her. Alarms blared as new data flooded their systems. Jack Morehouse's fingers flew over his console as he tried to make sense of the readings. "Captain, we're detecting temporal anomalies popping up all over the Atlantic. Ships from different eras appearing and disappearing, weather patterns from centuries past and future colliding." Emily's mind raced. They had solved one mystery only to create an even greater crisis. "Options, people. I need options." Dr. Chen stepped forward, his face grave. "We might be able to use the Nova Celeste to absorb the temporal energy like a lightning rod. But it would mean exposing ourselves to potentially lethal levels of chronal radiation." "And if we don't?" Emily asked, already knowing the answer. "Then the timeline as we know it could be irreparably damaged. Entire events, possibly even our own existence, could be erased." A heavy silence fell over the bridge as the crew grappled with the enormity of their situation. They had come seeking answers about the past, only to find the future itself hanging in the balance. Emily straightened, her decision made. "Prepare the ship. We're going to contain this, whatever it takes." As the crew rushed to implement Dr. Chen's plan, Emily found a quiet moment with Olivia. "I need you to do something for me," she said, pressing a data chip into her first mate's hand. "If this goes wrong, if we don't make it back, make sure this gets to my family. It explains everything." Olivia nodded, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "It's been an honor, Captain." The Nova Celeste plunged back into the heart of the temporal storm, its hull groaning under the strain of conflicting timelines. On the bridge, the crew worked feverishly to maintain stability as wave after wave of chronal energy battered the ship. "Temporal absorption at 60% and climbing," Dr. Chen called out, his voice barely audible over the cacophony of alarms. Emily gripped her command chair, her knuckles white. "Divert all non-essential power to the absorption array. We need every ounce of energy we can muster." Through the view screen, Emily watched in awe and terror as reality itself seemed to fracture around them. Ghostly images of ships from every era flickered in and out of existence, tall ships with billowing sails, ironclad warships belching smoke, and sleek vessels that looked more advanced than even the Nova Celeste. "Captain," Jack's panicked voice cut through the chaos. "We're losing structural integrity. The ship can't take much more of this." Emily's mind raced. They were so close, but at this rate they wouldn't survive long enough to complete the absorption. Unless... "Dr. Chen," she called out, an idea forming. "The temporal rift we used to communicate with the Mary Celeste, can we recreate it?" The scientist's eyes widened as he grasped her plan. "Yes, but..." Captain, if we do that, we'll be creating a feedback loop. The energy absorption would increase exponentially, but so would the danger to the ship and crew. Emily nodded grimly. Do it. It's our only chance. As Dr. Chen worked to implement her desperate gambit, Emily addressed her crew one last time. Whatever happens next, I want you all to know that it has been the greatest honor of my life to serve with you. We came here to solve a mystery, and in doing so we've been given the chance to save not just our own time, but all of history. Remember, no matter what era we come from, we are all part of the same human story. The ship shuddered violently as the temporal rift opened once more. Energy crackled across the hull, and for a moment Emily saw the ghostly outline of the Mary Celeste superimposed over the Nova Celeste. Past and present, mystery and solution all converging in this singular moment. Temporal absorption at 95%. Dr. Chen shouted. Just a few more seconds. Emily closed her eyes, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down upon her. In that moment, she saw flashes of all that had led to this point, the Mary Celeste setting sail, generations of her family puzzling over the mystery, the construction of the Nova Celeste, their journey through time. With a sound like reality itself tearing apart, the temporal energy reached its peak. The Nova Celeste was engulfed in a blinding light, and Emily felt herself stretched across time and space, experiencing every moment of her life and the lives of countless others simultaneously. Then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The light faded, the alarms fell silent, and the Nova Celeste drifted peacefully on calm seas. Emily opened her eyes, hardly daring to believe they had survived. "Status report," she croaked, her voice hoarse. One by one her crew responded, battered but alive. Dr. Chen's voice was filled with awe as he read the final results. "We did it, Captain. The temporal anomalies have been contained. The timeline, it's stable." A cheer went up from the exhausted crew, but Emily's relief was tempered by a sobering realization. They had saved history, but at what cost? And what would they find when they returned to their own time? As the Nova Celeste began its long journey home, Emily Briggs stood at the observation window, gazing out at the timeless sea. They had unravelled the mystery of the Mary Celeste and faced challenges beyond imagination. But she knew that the true test still lay ahead, returning to a world that might have been changed in ways they couldn't yet fathom, and bearing the weight of the incredible truth they had discovered. The mystery was solved, but their journey, it seemed, was far from over. Chapter 10, Ripples Through Time. The Nova Celeste broke through the morning mist, its scarred hull gleaming in the pale sunlight as it approached New York Harbor. On the bridge, Captain Emily Briggs stood rigid, her eyes fixed on the familiar yet somehow alien skyline before them. "Home," Olivia whispered beside her, the word carrying a weight of emotion and uncertainty. Emily nodded, her throat tight. After their harrowing journey through time, after unravelling the mystery of the Mary Celeste and narrowly averting a temporal catastrophe, the concept of home seemed both comforting and strange. As they drew closer to the harbour, the differences became more apparent. Subtle changes in the skyline, unfamiliar ships dotting the water, small ripples from their adventure that had altered the course of history in ways they were only beginning to understand. "Captain," Jack Morehouse called out, his voice tense, "we're being hailed by Harbour Control. They're asking for our temporal clearance codes." Emily and Olivia exchanged a startled glance. Temporal clearance codes? What exactly had they come back to? "Send them our standard identification," Emily ordered, her mind racing. "And prepare for possible quarantine procedures. We don't know how much the timeline has changed." As they awaited a response, Dr. Chen approached, his face grave. "Captain, I've been analysing our historical database against what we're seeing. The changes are subtle but significant. It seems our actions have led to an acceleration of temporal research and awareness." Emily nodded, unsurprised. They had known there would be consequences to their journey. The question now was how to navigate this new world they had inadvertently created. The comm system crackled to life, and a stern voice filled the bridge. Nova Celeste, you are ordered to dock at Temporal Quarantine Station Alpha. Prepare for decontamination and debriefing. As they maneuvered towards the designated station, a sleek, futuristic structure that definitely hadn't existed when they left, Emily addressed her crew one last time. Whatever we find when those doors open, remember this. What we've accomplished, what we've discovered, goes beyond any one time or place. We've seen the interconnectedness of history, the ripple effect of every action. Our responsibility now is to share that knowledge wisely, to help shape a future that honors the past while embracing the possibilities of tomorrow. The Nova Celeste docked with a gentle thud, and for a moment all was still. Then, with a hiss of hydraulics, the airlock opened, revealing a team of officials in unfamiliar uniforms. Captain Briggs, the lead official, stepped forward, her face a mask of professional detachment. Welcome back, or should I say, welcome to 2073. You've been gone for quite some time. Emily's heart skipped a beat. A year. They had lost a year. As the implications of this sank in, she straightened her shoulders and stepped forward to meet whatever this new future held. The debriefing that followed was intense and exhaustive. For days, the crew of the Nova Celeste recounted their journey in painstaking detail to a panel of scientists, historians, and government officials. They learned of the changes their actions had wrought, a world more aware of the fluid nature of time, where temporal research had become a key focus of scientific endeavor. But it was the personal revelations that hit hardest. Family members who had aged a year without them, relationships altered by their absence, a world that had moved on while they were lost in time. Through it all, Emily found herself returning to the lessons learned aboard the Mary Celeste. The interconnectedness of all things, the weight of choices made, the enduring power of mystery and discovery. As the debriefings concluded and the crew was finally cleared to re-enter society, Emily stood once more at the helm of the Nova Celeste. The ship, now a relic of a timeline that no longer quite existed, was to be decommissioned and studied. "Hard to say goodbye," Olivia said softly, joining her captain for one last look at the bridge that had been their home through an impossible journey. Emily nodded, running her hand along the smooth surface of the command console. "It's not goodbye," she said, a small smile playing at her lips. "It's just until the next mystery." As they disembarked for the final time, Emily Briggs carried with her the weight of two ships' histories, the Mary Celeste and the Nova Celeste, now forever intertwined. The mystery that had haunted her family for generations was solved, but in its place, 100 new questions had bloomed. She thought of Captain Benjamin Briggs, of the crew of the Mary Celeste, of all those who had been touched by the ripples of their shared journey through time. In solving one mystery, they had opened the door to countless others. As Emily stepped into the bright sunlight of a subtly changed New York, she felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. The world was different, yes, but it was also full of new possibilities, and she, along with her crew, was uniquely positioned to help shape the future of temporal exploration. The mystery of the Mary Celeste was solved, but the adventure, it seemed, was only just beginning. Epilogue. Years later, in a world forever changed by the revelations brought back by the Nova Celeste, Emily Briggs stood at the podium of the newly established Temporal Research Institute. Behind her, a holographic display showed the intertwined timelines of the Mary Celeste and the Nova Celeste, a visual representation of the incredible journey that had reshaped humanity's understanding of time and history. "We stand at a crossroads," Emily began, her voice carrying the weight of experience and the excitement of endless possibility. "Our exploration of the temporal realm has opened doors we never knew existed. But with this knowledge comes great responsibility. As we move forward into this new frontier, we must remember the lessons of the past, both our own and those we've glimpsed across the span of centuries." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the auditorium filled with eager young scientists and seasoned researchers alike. The mystery of the Mary Celeste taught us that history is not a fixed point, but a living, breathing entity that we all contribute to with every choice we make. Our journey showed us the interconnectedness of all things, the delicate balance of cause and effect that shapes our reality. As we embark on this new era of temporal exploration, let us carry with us the spirit of those who came before. The courage of Captain Benjamin Briggs and his crew, the determination of all those who sought answers across the decades, and the unity of purpose that saw the crew of the Nova Celeste through impossible challenges. Emily's voice softened, filled with emotion as she concluded. The greatest mystery, my friends, is not what lies in the past or the future, but what we choose to do with the present. Every moment is an opportunity to shape history, to create ripples that will echo through time. Let us use this knowledge wisely, with respect for the delicate fabric of time and space, and with hope for the incredible discoveries that await us. As applause filled the auditorium, Emily felt a familiar sense of anticipation coursing through her veins. The mysteries of time still beckoned, promising new adventures and discoveries beyond imagination. After the presentation, Emily found a quiet moment alone on the Institute's observation deck. The New York skyline stretched before her, subtly altered from the one she had known before her fateful voyage. Sleek temporal research facilities now stood alongside historic buildings, a visual reminder of how their journey had changed the course of history. A soft chime announced a visitor. Emily turned to see Olivia approaching, a warm smile on her face. "Quite a speech, Captain," Olivia said, joining Emily at the railing. "You've inspired a whole new generation of temporal explorers." Emily nodded, her gaze distant. "Sometimes I wonder if we did the right thing, Olivia, solving the mystery, changing the timeline, opening this Pandora's box of temporal exploration." Olivia placed a comforting hand on Emily's shoulder. "We didn't have a choice, and look at all the good that's come from it. New medical breakthroughs using temporal theory, advancements in clean energy, a deeper understanding of our own history." "And the risks?" Emily asked, voicing the concern that had nagged at her since their return.
"What if someone decides to use this knowledge for less noble purposes?"
"That's why we're here," Olivia replied firmly, "to guide this new field, to teach responsibility along with exploration. We've seen firsthand the consequences of meddling with time. Who better to ensure it's done right?" Emily smiled, feeling the weight on her shoulders lighten somewhat. "You're right, of course. It's just sometimes I miss the simplicity of our original mission. Solve a mystery, come home heroes." "Oh, I don't know," Olivia grinned. "I think creating an entirely new field of scientific study and reshaping humanity's understanding of time itself is pretty heroic." They shared a laugh, the camaraderie forged during their impossible journey as strong as ever. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily's communicator chimed. It was Dr. Chen, his excitement palpable, even through the small holographic display. "Captain, you need to see this. We've detected a new temporal anomaly, unlike anything we've encountered before. Well, you should just come see for yourself." Emily and Olivia exchanged a look, a familiar spark of adventure igniting in their eyes. The mystery of the Mary Celeste may have been solved, but it seemed the universe had plenty more secrets to reveal. "Shall we, Miss DeVoe?" Emily asked, a hint of her old commanding tone creeping into her voice. Olivia straightened, a playful salute accompanying her response. "Aye, aye, Captain," once more into the breach. As they hurried towards the research lab, Emily felt a surge of excitement. The weight of the past, the responsibility of the present, and the infinite possibilities of the future all converged in this moment. They had unravelled one great mystery, but in doing so had opened the door to countless others. The legacy of the Mary Celeste, the Nova Celeste, and all those who had been part of their intertwined stories would live on, not as a static piece of history, but as a continuing inspiration for exploration, discovery, and the enduring human spirit that drives us to seek answers among the stars and across the very fabric of time itself. As Emily Briggs stepped into the lab, ready to face whatever new temporal wonder awaited them, she knew that their greatest adventures still lay ahead. The mystery of the Mary Celeste had been just the beginning. The true voyage, humanity's journey into the depths of time and space, was only just starting. And she, along with her loyal crew and the new generations they had inspired, would be at the forefront, charting the course into a future filled with infinite possibilities. The end.